Ji-hoon was the heir to the most feared syndicate in South Korea, a man who viewed everyone as a tool or an obstacle. He moved into a secluded estate in the hills of Virginia to oversee his U.S. operations, demanding a staff that was silent and invisible. He hired Maya, a tall, quiet black woman who kept her head down and never made eye contact. Maya worked with a mechanical precision that bored him, her hands always covered in thick bandages she claimed were for dermatitis. Ji-hoon treated her like furniture, barking orders and throwing glass just to see if she would flinch, but she remained a stone wall of calm. What Ji-hoon didn't know was that Maya wasn't hiding from him. She was hiding from a past that had left her soul bruised. 5 years ago, she was the Midnight Queen, an undefeated heavyweight champion who walked away after a tragic ring accident. She chose a life of silence because her hands were lethal weapons she no longer wanted to use. She took the job at the estate because it was the last place anyone would look for a fallen legend. She scrubbed floors to pay for her younger sister's medical bills, suppressing the fire that still burned in her chest every time she heard the sound of a heavy bag. Ji-hoon's arrogance grew as his business rivals began to press in on his territory. He took his frustration out on Maya, mocking her size and her silence during his late-night drinking sessions. One evening, he threw a stack of bills on the floor and told her to bark for it, laughing with his bodyguards. Maya didn't bark. She simply picked up the money, placed it on the table, and walked away without a word. Her refusal to be broken started to fascinate him in a dark, twisted way. He couldn't understand why a simple maid had eyes that looked like they had seen more war than he had. The tension peaked when Ji-hoon brought a professional MMA fighter to the house to train in his private gym. He watched the fighter beat a sparring partner and then turned to Maya, who was cleaning the glass walls of the gym. With a cruel smirk, he told her that if she could stay in the ring for 3 minutes with the pro, he would pay off her sister's entire debt. He expected her to cry or beg, but instead, Maya stopped scrubbing. She looked at him for the first time, her gaze cold and sharp as a blade. She simply nodded and began unwrapping the bandages on her hands. As she stepped into the ring, the bodyguards laughed, taking bets on how fast she would fall. Maya didn't use a standard boxing stance. She stood relaxed, her breathing deep and rhythmic. When the pro fighter lunged, she didn't panic. She moved like a ghost, a blur of practiced footwork that left the man hitting air. Ji-hoon's smile faded as he realized she wasn't just avoiding hits, she was measuring her opponent. The maid was moving with the grace of a predator, and the air in the room suddenly felt very heavy. With 10 seconds left on the clock, the pro fighter grew frustrated and swung a wild, illegal elbow toward Maya's face. Instinct took over. Maya ducked, pivoted, and landed a lightning-fast jab to the man's solar plexus that sent him crashing to the canvas, gasping for air. The gym went silent, the only sound being the hum of the air conditioner. Maya didn't celebrate. She stepped over the fallen man, walked up to the edge of the ring, and stared directly into Ji-hoon's stunned eyes. She had won, but she knew her cover was blown. Ji-hoon realized in that moment that he hadn't hired a servant. He had invited a lion into his home. He felt a strange mix of fury and intense attraction, a spark he hadn't felt in years. He realized he knew nothing about the woman who made his coffee every morning. As Maya walked out of the gym to check on her sister, Ji-hoon picked up his phone and called his lead investigator. He gave a simple, chilling command: find out every single person she has ever fought and find out why she stopped. The atmosphere in the mansion changed overnight from employer-servant to a cold, psychological chess match. Ji-hoon kept his word and paid the medical bills, but he doubled Maya's workload, keeping her close so he could study her every move. He stopped bringing girls home and spent his nights sitting in the dark, watching her clean the foyer through the security cameras. He was obsessed with the contrast between her gentle hands and the power he saw in the ring. Maya felt his eyes on her and knew the quiet life she had built was crumbling under his gaze. One night, a rival gang attempted a hit on the estate while Ji-hoon was vulnerable in his study. 3 gunmen breached the perimeter, silencing the guards before reaching the main hallway. Maya was in the kitchen when she heard the muffled sound of a suppressed pistol. Instead of hiding, She grabbed a heavy iron skillet and moved through the shadows with terrifying silence. She intercepted the first gunman in the dark hallway, taking him down with 2 precise strikes before he could even raise his weapon. She wasn't a maid anymore. She was a soldier defending her territory. Ji-hoon was reaching for his desk drawer when the second gunman burst in, but Maya was faster. She tackled the man through the glass doors, the shards cutting her arms as they tumbled onto the terrace. She didn't feel the pain. She only felt the old adrenaline, the midnight queen, rising to the surface. She disarmed the man with a wrist lock that snapped bone and finished him with a hook that echoed through the hills. When the third gunman arrived, he saw his partners unconscious and Maya standing over them, her knuckles bleeding, looking like a goddess of war. The third man fled, leaving Ji-hoon alone with the woman he had spent months belittling. He stood up, his heart racing not from fear of the assassins, but from the raw power Maya radiated. He walked over to her and reached out to touch a cut on her cheek, but she flinched away, her eyes filled with a deep, ancient sadness. She told him she saved his life because it was her job, not because she cared for him. Ji-hoon realized that while he controlled her paycheck, he had zero control over her heart, and it drove him mad. He began to follow her when she went to the city on her days off, discovering her secret visits to a community center for underprivileged kids. He saw her teaching young girls how to defend themselves, her voice soft and encouraging, a total 180 from the silent woman in his house. He saw the way the community loved her, calling her Coach M, unaware of her violent past. Ji-hoon felt a pang of jealousy. He had all the money in the world, but no one looked at him with that kind of genuine warmth. He wanted to be part of her world, even if he had to burn his own down to do it. To force her closer, Ji-hoon arranged a charity gala at the mansion and demanded Maya attend as his guest, not his maid. He bought her a dress that cost more than her annual salary, a deep emerald silk that complemented her skin perfectly. When she walked down the stairs, the room went still. She carried herself with the dignity of royalty, outshining every socialite in the room. Ji-hoon's associates whispered, wondering who this mysterious woman was, while Maya felt like a bird in a gilded cage, hating every second of the display. The evening took a dark turn when a guest recognized Maya from her boxing days in London. The guest, a corrupt promoter who had lost millions when Maya retired, began to mock her loudly, calling her a washed-up fluke and a killer. The room fell silent as the man grew more aggressive, eventually grabbing Maya's arm to show off the scars on her wrists. Before Maya could react, Ji-hoon was there. He didn't use his fists. He used his power, calmly telling the man that if he didn't leave in 10 seconds, his entire business empire would be erased by morning. After the gala, the walls between them began to thin, replaced by a tense, magnetic pull. Ji-hoon stopped treating Maya like a servant and started asking her questions about her life before the accident. Maya was hesitant, but she slowly revealed the weight she carried, the guilt of a final match where her opponent never woke up. She told him she didn't quit because she was scared of losing, but because she was scared of what she was capable of doing to people. Ji-hoon, who had spent his life hurting people for profit, found himself moved by her empathy. He tried to show her his world in a different light, taking her to a secret rooftop in the city where they could see the lights of the harbor. He confessed that he hated the mafia life, that he was born into it and didn't know how to get out without a body bag. For a moment, they weren't the boss and the maid, or the mobster and the boxer. They were just 2 lonely souls trapped by their pasts. They shared a quiet, lingering look that promised something more, but Maya knew that a world of blood and a world of peace could never truly mix. The peace was shattered when the old guard of Ji-hoon's family in Korea grew suspicious of his obsession with the American woman. They viewed Maya as a distraction and a liability to the syndicate's reputation. A high-ranking uncle arrived unannounced, demanding Ji-hoon dispose of the maid to prove his loyalty to the family name. Ji-hoon refused, standing his ground against the man who had raised him in the business. This act of defiance sparked a civil war within his own organization, putting a target on both of their backs. Maya realized that by staying, she was putting Ji-hoon in danger, and by leaving, she was leaving him to be slaughtered by his own people. She decided to train him. If they were going to survive the coming storm, he needed to know how to fight like a warrior, not just a bully with a gun. They spent their nights in the basement gym, Maya pushing him to his physical limits. She was a brutal teacher, showing him no mercy, forcing him to find the strength he had buried under layers of expensive suits and arrogance. During these training sessions, the physical closeness sparked a fire they could no longer ignore. During a grappling drill, they ended up pinned against the mat, their breath mingling in the cold air. The tension was thick enough to cut, a silent acknowledgement of the love they were both too afraid to voice. Ji-hoon realized he would give up everything, his wealth, his title, his power, just to keep her safe. But Maya knew the Mafia didn't let people go, they only let them die, and she prepared herself for the ultimate sacrifice. The internal hit squad arrived on a rainy Tuesday, led by the uncle's top enforcer, a man known for his cruelty. They didn't come with guns, they came with blades, wanting to make a statement. Maya and Ji-hoon fought side by side in the darkened corridors of the estate. It was a brutal, cinematic dance of defense and counterattack. Maya was a whirlwind of precision, her punches breaking ribs and spirits, while Ji-hoon used the tactics she taught him to hold the line. They were a perfect team, a duo of fire and ice that the assassins weren't prepared for. Despite their victory, the uncle escaped, promising to return with a small army. Maya looked at the destruction of the home she had cleaned for months and realized they couldn't run anymore. She told Ji-hoon that the only way to end this was to go to the source, to Korea. She would enter the underground fighting circuit there, drawing the uncle out into the open where Ji-hoon could dismantle his power once and for all. It was a suicide mission, but it was the only way they could ever be free to love each other in the light. They arrived in Seoul under false identities, moving into a cramped apartment in the neon-soaked district of Gangnam. The roles had reversed. Now Ji-hoon was the one protecting Maya as she prepared to enter the most dangerous illegal fighting ring in Asia. This wasn't the professional boxing she knew. It was a no-rules pit where people died for sport. Maya had to rebuild her reputation from scratch, fighting under the name The Black Ghost. Every night, she stepped into the pit. She felt a piece of her soul hardening, but she did it for the man who was now her everything. Ji-hoon used his remaining contacts to infiltrate his uncle's inner circle, playing the role of the disgraced nephew looking for forgiveness. He had to watch Maya fight from the shadows, his heart breaking every time she took a hit. He hated seeing her back in the world of violence she had worked so hard to escape. He spent his nights cleaning her wounds, his hands trembling as he touched the scars he had once mocked. He promised her that after this, they would find a small town where no one knew their names, and they would never fight again. The uncle, greedy for the massive gambling profits Maya was generating, finally took the bait. He arranged a title match between Maya and his own champion, a mountain of a man who used performance-enhancing drugs and fought with metal in his gloves. The stakes were simple. If Maya won, Ji-hoon would be given his freedom and the uncle would retire. If Maya lost, she would become the uncle's property, and Ji-hoon would be executed. Maya looked at the monster she had to face and felt a flicker of fear, not for herself, but for the life she might never get to lead with Ji-hoon. The night of the fight, the underground arena was packed with the elite of the Korean underworld. Ji-hoon was forced to sit next to his uncle, a gun pressed against his ribs under the table. Maya entered the pit to a chorus of boos, the only person in the room believing in her being the man she was fighting for. The first round was a bloodbath. Maya was faster, but the opponent's strength was supernatural. She was knocked down 3 times, her vision blurring, her ribs screaming in pain. The crowd roared for her end. In the corner between rounds, Ji-hoon managed to catch her eye. He didn't shout instructions. He simply mouthed the words, "I love you." It was the first time he had said it. Maya felt a surge of energy that defied physics. She remembered why she was the Midnight Queen, not because she was the strongest, but because she had the most to lose. She stood up, spat blood on the floor, and changed her stance. She stopped boxing and started fighting like a woman with nothing left to fear. She exploited the giant's slow recovery time, landing a series of body shots that sounded like gunshots. She moved with a ferocity that terrified the spectators, her eyes locked on her target with predatory focus. In a final, explosive combination, she landed a lead hook followed by a devastating uppercut that lifted the giant off his feet. He crashed to the ground, unconscious before he hit the dirt. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya had won, but the uncle wasn't a man of his word. He gave the signal for the execution. Chaos erupted in the arena. Ji-hoon had anticipated the betrayal and had his own loyalists hidden in the crowd. A massive gunfight broke out, but Maya didn't reach for a weapon. She jumped out of the pit and headed straight for the uncle. Before his bodyguards could react, she was upon them. She didn't kill them, but she neutralized them with the same efficiency she used in the ring. She cornered the uncle, her fist cocked back, ready to end the man who had caused so much misery. But she stopped. She looked at Ji-hoon, who was holding a gun to a rival's head, and she lowered her hand. Maya chose mercy, proving she was better than the world they were trapped in. She turned the uncle over to the authorities with enough evidence of his illegal betting ring to bury him for life. In the aftermath, Ji-hoon officially died. In the eyes of the mafia, his death faked with the help of a corrupt coroner. They burned the records of his existence and took the remaining cash he had stashed in offshore accounts. They were dead to the world, but for the first time in their lives, they were actually alive. They fled to a small, coastal town in South Carolina, a place where the air smelled of salt and the pace of life was slow. Ji-hoon bought a dilapidated boatyard, and Maya opened a gym for the local youth, focusing on discipline and self-worth. They lived in a modest house on the water, far from the skyscrapers of Seoul and the mansions of Virginia. The arrogant mafia boss now wore grease-stained shirts and fixed engines, while the ruthless boxer baked bread and taught children how to stand tall. Their love was a quiet, deep ocean. There were still nights when Maya woke up screaming from nightmares of the ring, and nights when Ji-hoon reached for a gun that wasn't there. But they had each other to lean on. Ji-hoon had learned that true power didn't come from fear, but from the ability to protect what you love. Maya had learned that her hands weren't just for breaking things. They were for holding the person who saw her soul when she was just a shadow in the corner. One afternoon, a black SUV pulled up to the boatyard. A man in a suit stepped out, looking like a ghost from their past. Ji-hoon stood his ground, a wrench in his hand, ready to fight for the life he had built. The man handed him a folder and said nothing before driving away. Inside was a letter from Ji-hoon's sister in Korea, telling him the family had moved on, and he was finally, truly forgotten. It was the final seal on their freedom. Ji-hoon sat on the dock and cried, the weight of 1,000 years finally falling off his shoulders. Maya came out and sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder as the sun began to set over the Atlantic. She told him that she was pregnant, a revelation that brought a new kind of fear and a new kind of joy to their lives. They promised that their child would never know the sound of a gun or the sting of a punch. They would grow up in a world of sunlight and safety, a world their parents had bled to create. The cycle of violence was finally broken, replaced by the rhythm of a tide. The story of the mafia boss and the maid became a local legend, though no one knew the truth. They were just the couple down the street who worked hard and loved harder. Ji-hoon often watched Maya through the window as she worked in the garden, marveling at how a woman so powerful could be so gentle. He realized that the greatest fight he ever won was the challenge she gave him, to stop being a monster and start being a man. He had lost the fight in the gym that first day, but he had won the war for his soul. As the screen fades to black, we see a framed photo on their mantle. It's not a photo of a championship belt or a pile of money. It's a grainy, candid shot of Ji-hoon and Maya laughing on a park bench, their hands intertwined. The bandages are gone from Maya's hands, replaced by a simple gold band. The final twist is revealed in the very last second. The rival, who recognized her at the gala, was actually working for Maya the whole time. She had orchestrated her own exposure to force Ji-hoon to choose between his empire and her. She knew he had a heart. She just had to make him fight for it.